Sometimes, the smallest step feels like the hardest one. Caleb Donovan's words echoed in his mind as he stood on the edge of the scorched plain, the sky above swirling with violet and orange clouds that reflected off the shards of metal scattered across the ground, his boots sinking slightly into the coarse red sand. Each breath carried the faint scent of ozone and dust, and the distant hum of energy fields thrummed like a heartbeat beneath his feet. He glanced toward the jagged horizon where the first glimmers of an alien city's spires caught the last light of the setting sun, and in that moment, the vastness of the world pressed against him, a mixture of awe and anticipation. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a figure shifted, motion almost imperceptible but deliberate. Caleb's gaze narrowed as the glow of the armor caught the fading light. Seraphine Kyra, standing with her body angled to maintain balance, her hair a cascade of silver threads that shimmered against the ambient glow, her eyes sharp and calculating, yet betrayed a flicker of fatigue. He took a slow step forward, the sand crunching beneath him, each movement measured, careful, as though the ground itself held secrets waiting to test his resolve. The wind tugged at his jacket, carrying with it the tang of distant minerals and the hum of unseen energy conduits that stretched across the city in faint, almost musical resonance. Caleb's hand brushed against a compact device on his belt, not out of fear but habit, a rhythm that kept him anchored to the logic of preparation even when the moment felt suspended in uncertainty. He noticed the subtle tension in Seraphine's posture, the way her shoulders were squared as if bracing against invisible forces, yet her expression remained composed, reflecting strength honed through experience. A faint vibration underfoot hinted at activity further down the plain, and the two of them shared a silent acknowledgement, a mutual recognition of the space between safety and exposure, trust and doubt. Caleb stepped again, closer now, eyes scanning the patterns of light reflecting off the terrain, mapping paths that might be safe, paths that demanded caution. Seraphine shifted, a whisper of movement, almost a gesture, her attention fixed forward, yet unavoidably aware of him. The atmosphere felt electric, not in sparks but in expectation, a quiet tension that threaded through the air like the invisible lines of energy rippling from the city beyond. Caleb inhaled sharply, the dry air filling his lungs, grounding him, and with each exhale, he sensed the magnitude of the moment, the beginning of a connection, an understanding that didn't need words, only presence. The sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows that interwove their forms, a dance of anticipation and silent challenge, while the ambient hum deepened, resonating through his chest. Every flicker of light on Seraphine's armor, every subtle tilt of her head, every unspoken calculation became a narrative in itself, and Caleb felt the weight of attention, of purpose, without needing to act hastily. His eyes met hers briefly, a flicker of recognition, and the distance between them seemed both vast and intimate, a paradox framed by the fading light and rising tension. Time elongated, each second stretching as though measured by the unspoken dialogue of presence and observation, until the shadows converged and the wind carried the faintest hum of the city's machinery closer, hinting at the trials yet to come, a silent prelude to the journey both understood was unavoidable. Caleb adjusted the strap of his satchel as he moved across the plain, every step deliberate, the coarse red sand shifting beneath his boots, carrying with it the faint scent of minerals and ozone, while the distant city glimmered against the violet horizon, spires catching the last light and throwing fractured reflections across the dunes. Seraphine followed at a measured pace, each movement precise, her armor glinting subtly with traces of energy that pulsed in quiet rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, the silver threads of her hair catching the ambient glow as she surveyed the terrain, analyzing angles and shadows with practiced calculation. Caleb slowed near a ridge, crouching slightly, his eyes tracing patterns of light and shadow, noting the subtle ripples in the air that indicated thermal currents and energy flows. Seraphine stopped beside him, her presence a quiet weight, and for a moment they simply observed together, the wind carrying the faint hum of distant machinery and the scent of distant minerals, a shared awareness that spoke without words. Caleb reached into his satchel and pulled out a small water flask, offering it with a simple nod, the gesture deliberate, unassuming, yet it held a quiet reassurance. Seraphine tilted her head, accepting the water with a measured grace, her eyes softening, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them that transcended the barriers of language and species. The light shifted as the sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows that intertwined across the dunes, and the air seemed charged, not with danger, but with expectation, a silent understanding that each step forward was a choice, deliberate and meaningful. Caleb adjusted his stance, feeling the vibration of the ground beneath him, subtle pulses from unseen sources, mapping possibilities and hazards without a word, while Seraphine mirrored his awareness, her gaze scanning the horizon, noting the interplay of light and terrain, the hidden patterns that might guide them or warn them of obstacles ahead. The quiet between them was filled with the sound of shifting sand, the whisper of wind, and the faint hum of distant energy conduits, a tapestry of sensory input that drew them closer into a rhythm of silent communication. Caleb extended a hand briefly, a gesture to guide Seraphine over a particularly uneven ridge, and she accepted with a nod, the brief contact a tether of trust, a recognition that their presence together was more than coincidence, a mutual understanding forming through shared observation and deliberate action. The sky deepened into richer shades of violet and orange, the city lights beyond flickering like distant stars reflected in pools of water in hidden crevices, and each step they took seemed measured against the pulse of the landscape itself. Caleb inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the scent of sand and ozone, the subtle vibrations underfoot, the faint hum of energy rippling across the plain, while Seraphine mirrored his attentiveness, her eyes tracing patterns that revealed subtle dangers and opportunities alike. The moment stretched, elongated, a meditation on presence and awareness, as they moved together, a pair bound by circumstance and observation, the unspoken understanding growing with each careful step across the alien terrain, the anticipation building quietly toward the challenges that lay ahead without a single word exchanged, only the rhythm of movement, light, and observation guiding them forward. The wind shifted, carrying a cooler current over the red dunes, brushing against Caleb Donovan's face as he paused to survey the path ahead, the faint glow of the alien city spires reflecting in his eyes. Seraphine Kyra moved beside him, her steps measured and silent, the subtle hum of her armor barely audible, each movement a testament to discipline and control. Caleb noted the delicate interplay of shadows cast by jagged rocks, the way the sun dipped lower, turning the sky a deep shade of amber with streaks of violet cutting across the horizon, painting the landscape in contrasting light and dark. He reached into his satchel and drew out a small scanning device, letting it hover slightly above the sand, the screen illuminating intricate patterns of energy currents that pulsed beneath the surface, mapping potential pathways and hidden obstacles. Seraphine leaned slightly, her eyes tracking the readout, her gaze steady and focused, the silver strands of her hair catching the dying sunlight and shimmering like liquid metal. Caleb exhaled slowly, feeling the vibration of the earth beneath them, the subtle thrum aligning with his heartbeat, as though the terrain itself was communicating a silent rhythm. The plain stretched endlessly, yet each step forward was deliberate, a careful negotiation between caution and progress, the air thick with the scent of ozone and warmed minerals. Seraphine extended a hand briefly toward a raised ridge, guiding Caleb over the uneven surface with a simple, unspoken gesture that conveyed both trust and recognition, the connection between them strengthening through movement and presence alone. Shadows lengthened as the light shifted, each contour of the sand and rock becoming more pronounced, highlighting the subtle variations that might indicate a safe passage or a precarious ledge, and Caleb adjusted his footing accordingly, sensing the balance of the environment and his own role within it. The distant hum of the city grew slightly louder, a background resonance that hinted at activity without revealing form or purpose, blending with the natural sounds of wind brushing against stone and sand. Seraphine paused, tilting her head to listen, the faintest indication of thought crossing her expression as she considered the patterns and currents that Caleb had revealed, and together they moved in quiet harmony, observing and adjusting, learning the rhythm of the terrain and each other. Light flickered across the dunes as the sun continued its descent, casting elongated shadows that intertwined and shifted, creating a dynamic tapestry of perception and awareness. Caleb's eyes followed the subtle movements, the rise and fall of the dunes, the gentle scattering of loose sand under their steps, while Seraphine's attention remained equally acute, noticing every reflection, every minor shift that could inform their path. Time stretched and compressed in measured increments, the landscape a living canvas, and in this shared observation, a tacit understanding emerged between human and alien, a recognition of the necessity of patience, awareness, and mutual reliance. Every inhalation drew in the scent of the alien minerals, the warmth of the air, and the subtle vibrations transmitted through the ground, anchoring Caleb to the present and heightening his awareness, while Seraphine mirrored his attentiveness, her gaze tracking minute details that spoke volumes in silence, both preparing for the next phase of the journey with deliberate and calculated care, moving together through a world that was as beautiful as it was challenging. Caleb and Seraphine reached a narrow canyon, the walls rising sharply on either side, their surfaces etched with iridescent minerals that caught the fading sunlight and refracted it into muted streaks of violet and gold, casting intricate patterns across the ground that shifted with every step. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint metallic scent that hinted at ancient energy sources hidden within the stone, and the distant hum of the alien city seemed muffled, replaced by a subtler resonance that pulsed through the canyon floor. Caleb paused, crouching slightly to examine a series of shallow depressions in the sand, the contours revealing the presence of wind-blown formations and subtle shifts in the terrain, mapping potential safe paths and points of stability. Seraphine leaned over his shoulder, her eyes catching the reflection of light off the crystalline veins embedded in the canyon walls, observing how the shadows elongated and contracted as the sun sank lower, and for a moment, they simply watched, the silence between them filled with shared focus and unspoken communication. Caleb extended a hand, brushing aside a loose layer of sand to reveal a more stable footing, and Seraphine mirrored the gesture, adjusting her stance in response, the delicate choreography of movement and observation binding their efforts together without words. The sky above narrowed to streaks of deep orange and purple, the interplay of color against the jagged rock creating a visual rhythm that guided their perception of distance and depth, while the faint hum beneath the surface seemed to sync with their steps, a subtle cadence that heightened awareness. Caleb lifted a compact scanning device from his satchel, letting it hover slightly above the ground, its sensors illuminating unseen contours and energy traces, while Seraphine observed, her gaze sharp, tracking every flicker of reflection, every minor shift in shadow that could signal a change in stability. The canyon walls occasionally reflected a glint of the distant city light, hinting at the path they were to follow, and Caleb adjusted his movement to align with the subtle gradients of slope and texture beneath his boots, while Seraphine adapted fluidly, her steps precise, controlled, each one conveying awareness and readiness. The quiet around them was filled with the natural whispers of wind brushing against stone, the subtle vibration of hidden energy, and the occasional scatter of sand grains tumbling down miniature ledges, all of which they absorbed in a rhythm of perception and anticipation. As they advanced, Caleb noted the way light and shadow played across Seraphine's form, highlighting the contours of her armor and the fluidity of her movements, and he sensed the growing connection of understanding, trust, and mutual respect that had formed through shared observation, deliberate action, and attentive presence. Every inhalation drew in the layered sense of the canyon, the warmth of the rocks touched by sunlight, and the faint trace of distant minerals, anchoring Caleb in the immediate environment while sharpening his focus, as Seraphine's mirrored attention caught the slightest variations in terrain, both moving forward with deliberate care, silently preparing for the next stage of the journey, aware that each step, each observation, each shared gesture carried significance and meaning in the unfolding path ahead. Caleb and Seraphine emerged from the narrowing canyon into an open plateau, the air lighter here, carrying the faint scent of alien flora mixed with mineral dust, and the distant city lights shimmered like mirrored constellations against the deepening violet sky. Caleb adjusted his satchel, feeling the subtle hum of the terrain beneath him, a vibration that hinted at hidden currents of energy, guiding his awareness as he scanned the ground for irregularities, the subtle play of light and shadow revealing textures invisible at first glance. Seraphine moved alongside him, her steps fluid and precise, the silver strands of her hair catching the ambient light, glimmering with each movement, her eyes tracing the distant spires with quiet calculation, noting every subtle change in color and reflection. Caleb reached into his satchel, retrieving a small device that projected a faint holographic map of energy patterns ahead, the lines and pulses giving him a sense of safe paths and potential hazards, and Seraphine leaned slightly to study the projection, her expression focused, reflective, a hint of admiration passing through her gaze. The plateau stretched endlessly, the wind whispering across the uneven ground, carrying the distant hum of city machinery and the occasional soft rustle of alien foliage, creating a rhythm that guided their movement without words. Caleb took a deliberate step, noting how the light shifted across a cluster of rock formations, revealing hidden crevices and subtle gradients, while Seraphine mirrored his attention, adjusting her stance, her body responding to the environment with a practiced grace that seemed effortless yet precise. A subtle vibration beneath their feet synchronized with the soft hum in the air, heightening Caleb's awareness, and he could feel the faintest changes in slope and texture through the soles of his boots, each shift informing the path forward, while Seraphine's eyes caught the glint of distant reflective surfaces, indicating angles and contours that he might have overlooked. They moved in tandem, a silent coordination born of observation and understanding, each step reinforcing the growing sense of trust and awareness between them. The plateau was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, streaks of amber and deep violet intertwining across the surface, and the reflections on Seraphine's armor flickered and danced with the shifting light, creating a visual rhythm that Caleb found grounding and motivating. Every inhalation brought the crisp scent of mineral-laden air, grounding him, while Seraphine absorbed every visual cue, her focus unwavering, both attuned to the subtle narratives written in the environment itself. Shadows elongated as they approached a gentle incline leading toward a cluster of spires, the patterns of light shifting dynamically with each movement, and Caleb adjusted his pace to maintain balance, while Seraphine's movements remained precise, anticipatory, and synchronized with his, each step a quiet affirmation of their mutual understanding. The distant hum of energy grew slightly stronger, not threatening, but present, guiding them forward, and Caleb felt the quiet tension of anticipation building with each step, the plateau and the city ahead a canvas of possibilities, waiting to be navigated with deliberate care and attentive awareness, their shared observation and measured action carrying them forward toward the next stage of the journey. Caleb and Seraphine continued along the plateau, the wind picking up and carrying a faint crispness as the sun sank further below the horizon, casting long, stretching shadows across the uneven terrain and painting the dunes in gradients of deep purple and molten gold. Caleb slowed his pace, crouching briefly to examine a cluster of reflective stones that glimmered faintly under the last light, their surfaces revealing subtle shifts in elevation and texture that might influence their footing, while Seraphine observed silently, her eyes tracking each shimmer and contour with meticulous attention, her breathing calm and deliberate. The air was filled with the low hum of energy radiating from the distant city, a soft resonance that mingled with the whisper of wind across the dunes and the faint stir of alien vegetation swaying in subtle rhythms. Caleb extended a hand toward a smoother patch of terrain, brushing aside a thin layer of sand to expose firmer ground, and Seraphine mirrored the action, stepping carefully as they navigated the subtle undulations of the plateau, each movement reinforcing their silent communication and mutual trust. The light continued to shift, casting elongated patterns that danced across the plateau, reflecting off Seraphine's armor in flickering waves, and Caleb noted the subtle interplay of shadows that revealed the hidden depth of each dune and rock formation. A small device in Caleb's satchel projected faint, ephemeral lines onto the ground, mapping energy currents and highlighting areas of stability, while Seraphine adjusted her stance to incorporate the visual data, her gaze scanning the horizon for anomalies and shifts in terrain that could influence their path. They moved in tandem, each step deliberate, synchronized with the vibrations and hums beneath their feet, absorbing the cadence of the landscape as if it were a language of its own, a dialogue of presence and observation that required no words. Caleb inhaled the crisp air, feeling the mineral-laden scent settle in his lungs, grounding him, while Seraphine mirrored his attentiveness, her eyes catching subtle glints that indicated the precise slope and alignment of distant rocks. The plateau stretched ahead, seemingly endless, yet every motion, every glance, every silent gesture reinforced their growing connection and shared awareness. The distant spires shimmered faintly, reflecting the last vestiges of sunlight and hinting at the path they were to follow, and Caleb adjusted his steps to align with the subtle gradients, while Seraphine moved with fluid precision, anticipating each change in elevation and light. Shadows lengthened, and the air seemed charged with expectation, not of danger, but of discovery, a rhythm of observation and anticipation that guided them forward. Every step reinforced their awareness of the terrain, each movement synchronized with the others, the environment, and the subtle currents of energy that whispered beneath the surface, leading them with deliberate care toward the next phase of their journey, a quiet dance of trust, attention, and understanding that carried them steadily across the plateau toward the illuminated city ahead. Caleb and Seraphine reached the edge of a jagged cliff that overlooked the glowing city below, the lights reflecting against the rippling surface of a distant river that wound like a silver ribbon through the urban landscape. And the air here was cooler, carrying a faint metallic tang mixed with the subtle scent of alien flora. Caleb crouched to examine the ground beneath him, noting the small variations in the texture of the stone and the occasional shimmer of mineral veins that caught the light, revealing the safest path forward, while Seraphine adjusted her stance, her eyes sweeping the horizon and the drop below, calculating angles and distances with precision. The fading sunlight cast long, stretching shadows across the plateau, deepening the contrast between light and dark, and the canyon walls below reflected the city lights like distant stars scattered across a mirrored sky. Caleb reached into his satchel and pulled out a small device that projected a faint holographic overlay on the terrain, highlighting subtle energy currents and structural formations, and Seraphine leaned slightly, her gaze following the lines with quiet focus, her expression revealing thoughtfulness and careful analysis. They paused together at the precipice, feeling the gentle vibration of the ground beneath their feet, a subtle hum that seemed to align with the pulse of the distant city, guiding them in silence and reinforcing their shared awareness of the environment. Caleb exhaled slowly, taking in the crisp air and the layered scents of stone and minerals, grounding himself, while Seraphine mirrored his attentiveness, her movements deliberate, her body fluid yet controlled, adjusting to each shift in perspective and light. The wind shifted, carrying faint whispers of distant activity and the soft rustle of alien vegetation growing along the cliff edges, creating a rhythm of sound that blended seamlessly with the ambient hum of energy flowing through the plateau and below. Caleb extended a hand toward a more stable outcropping, brushing away loose debris to ensure a safe footing, and Seraphine stepped carefully, her attention never leaving the subtle details of the terrain, the reflections of light, and the faint vibrations beneath her boots, each motion deliberate and precise. The cliffside offered a panoramic view of the city, the spires catching the remaining sunlight and refracting it into streaks of amber and violet, and Caleb felt the weight of the moment, the anticipation of what lay ahead tempered by the careful observation and the measured pace of their movement. Every inhalation brought awareness of the environment, from the scent of stone to the faint hum resonating through the ground, while every glance captured the interplay of shadow and reflection across the plateau and canyon walls, reinforcing their growing connection through silent observation. The path ahead remained uncertain, yet the deliberate cadence of steps, synchronized observation, and mutual awareness carried them forward, each gesture, each glance, each adjustment a part of the evolving understanding between human and alien as they prepared for the next phase of their journey. The city lights below promising both discovery and challenge, the air charged with anticipation. and the shared focus binding them together in quiet readiness. Caleb and Seraphine descended cautiously from the cliff, the plateau giving way to a series of gently sloping terraces that led toward the luminous city below, each step measured against the texture of the stone and the faint vibrations that pulsed through the ground. The ambient light shifted subtly as the sun dipped further, reflecting off crystalline formations embedded in the terrain and casting elongated patterns across the path, while the soft hum of distant energy fields resonated through the air, blending with the faint rustle of alien vegetation and the occasional glint of reflective minerals. Caleb paused to study a narrow pathway between two jagged outcrops, brushing aside loose sand to reveal the underlying stone, and Seraphine mirrored his attention, her gaze sharp and calculating as she traced the angles of light and shadow to anticipate the safest route. The air was crisp and carried a faint metallic scent that hinted at distant machinery and hidden energy conduits, creating a rhythm that both of them absorbed instinctively, their movements synchronized without verbal communication. Caleb extended a hand briefly to stabilize himself over an uneven ledge, and Seraphine responded in kind, her body fluid and balanced, adapting seamlessly to the subtle shifts of the terrain while maintaining her focus on the distant city spires, their lights twinkling like stars against the deepening violet sky. The shifting light played across the surface of her armor, creating reflections that flickered and danced with every movement, drawing Caleb's attention to the interplay of shadows and highlighting subtle contours of the landscape that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. They moved forward with deliberate care, each step guided by careful observation and mutual awareness, the silent coordination between them strengthening with every movement. Caleb inhaled deeply, feeling the mineral-laden air fill his lungs and grounding him in the present, while Seraphine scanned every visual cue, each reflection, each faint shift in terrain reinforcing their understanding of the immediate environment. The distant hum of the city grew perceptible, the rhythm of energy currents beneath the surface syncing with their cautious pace, creating a subtle cadence that guided their progression forward. Shadows lengthened and intertwined with the reflective surfaces of rocks and minerals, producing a dynamic pattern that continuously informed their perception of depth and distance, while the faint ambient sounds of wind and energy harmonized with the quiet determination that moved them onward. Every glance, every adjustment, every silent gesture between Caleb and Seraphine reinforced the shared understanding that had grown through observation and attentiveness, the unspoken dialogue of presence and perception shaping the way they navigated the terrain. The terraces unfolded ahead, each one offering both challenge and insight, guiding them with subtle visual and tactile cues, the glow of the city acting as both destination and guide. And Caleb and Seraphine continued, their movements precise, deliberate, and in harmony, each step a testament to careful observation, trust, and the quiet rhythm of their shared journey through the alien landscape. Caleb and Seraphine finally reached the edge of the city, the glowing spires rising above the horizon like a constellation come to life, reflecting soft amber and violet hues across the smooth surfaces of the plaza below. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of energized metals and distant flora, and the gentle hum of the city's energy grid pulsed subtly through the ground beneath their feet. Caleb paused, taking in the scale of the architecture, noting the intricate patterns of light that traced along walkways and edges, each one telling a story of design and function without a single word, while Seraphine mirrored his observation, her eyes capturing every detail, from the shifting reflections to the subtle interplay of shadow and luminescence. The wind carried whispers through narrow alleys and across open terraces, and the soft vibrations in the stones beneath their boots gave a sense of the underlying currents of energy that shaped the city's life, grounding Caleb in both place and purpose. They moved slowly forward, each step deliberate, aware of the subtle shifts in elevation and the reflective surfaces that could alter perception, every gesture and movement synchronized through shared awareness. Caleb extended a hand toward a low railing, feeling the cool metal under his fingertips, while Seraphine adjusted her stride to match, her presence calm yet alert, each motion precise and intentional. The distant hum of energy resonated with the rhythm of their steps, a quiet cadence that guided their pace, while shafts of colored light from above danced across walls and floors, casting patterns that shifted with every movement, drawing attention to the beauty and complexity of the city around them. Caleb breathed in the crisp air, filling his lungs with the layered sense of metal and minerals, grounding himself in the moment, while Seraphine's gaze remained sharp, noting subtle shifts in light and texture that informed their path, every observation adding depth to the silent understanding between them. As they approached the central terrace, the glow of the city intensified, reflecting off polished surfaces and casting a gentle, warm light onto their faces, revealing details of expression, focus, and anticipation. Shadows intertwined with the illuminated lines of architecture, creating a living tapestry that responded dynamically to their presence and movement, heightening the sense of immersion and connection with the environment. Caleb felt the weight of accomplishment mixed with curiosity, the journey reaching a point of quiet revelation, while Seraphine's posture relaxed slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of shared understanding and respect passing between them. The plaza before them opened into a panoramic view, each spire, terrace, and reflection contributing to a sense of scale, wonder, and the quiet power of observation. And in that suspended moment, Caleb and Seraphine simply stood, absorbing the intricate beauty and rhythm of the city, the air filled with anticipation and unspoken promise. The culmination of their journey marked not by words but by the still, reflective silence that resonated with meaning and human connection amidst the alien brilliance.